What's that about my gear?
I'll never stop saying it. Repair your gear, pay someone, or get a kit and do it yourself. If you get caught somewhere with broken gear, I'm not gonna be happy.
Oh, you mean someplace like this? Check your own gear, brother. I'm ready. Let's do this. Man, what happened in there? Well, I'm glad you're okay. Oh, we've got company. Hey guys, Centurion here at ESO Vault with my friend Sharp as Night. I got asked a question in the comments section of one of my videos. And the question was very simply, do you have a 1-bar stamina sorcerer with no pets? And I posted a link to one of my videos. I added a comment that unfortunately the weapon had to be a lightning staff. Other weapons wouldn't work with a 1-bar build. And I patted myself on the back for my speedy response, and I went back to whatever I was doing. But I started to think about my answer and the fact that it's not entirely true. I've seen 1-bar Stamsorc builds that don't use a lightning staff, but they're usually one of two types. They're typically either a detuned Petsorc build with Relinquent and Pillar of Nirn, or they're kind of role-playish builds where they didn't seem like they would work very well, and there doesn't seem to be much in between. And I don't have anything against roleplay builds, mind you, but I don't actually do what I would call roleplay builds here on my channel. So anyway, I started to think, now that we're going to have the new scribing system, can't I come up with a non-pet Stamsorc build with simple gear that works decently? Can I not come up with a 1-bar build with a weapon other than a lightning staff where the damage is in the same ballpark? And I logged onto the test server and went to work. Today's video is a result of that session. I've got a classic Stamsorc for you that only uses 1 bar. The damage is right up there with the 1-bar lightning staff builds I've uploaded. But I want to say right off the bat that this doesn't have the same survivability as a heavy attack build. First, that's because it's not a heavy attack build. This build relies on skills for damage and will do best in group content where a tank and a healer are present. You can run this as a solo build provided you're not going to take on anything too intense. Where this build shines is in allowing a player to play a very simple build that may line up more with their vision for their character than a build where you have to tote a lightning staff around. If you want to play a thief with daggers but you don't want the complexity of a 2-bar setup, then this build may work for you. Also, other than the Oaken Soul ring, the gear for this build couldn't be any easier to get. The question that started this came from Pop Goes the Weasel 7636, and I appreciate that you made me put my thinking cap on and venture into what's new territory for me. And that's today's no staff, no pet, no trials gear Oaken Soul Stamsorc build. Okay, on to the character sheet.
I need to tell you something. You're the only one I know who's nosy enough to care. It's about my former job broker, Federo. I have been wanting to have a word with him ever since everything went tailed up on my last job. You know, the one where we met. He hired me and paid me on time, that's all you need to know. But I haven't heard from him since the Raynilla job. I figured he had some connection to the Reformer and my forgotten past. I was thinking we ought to pay him a visit.
I think you're right. Let's go see him as soon as we finish up here. Here on the character sheet, you can see that I'm a High Elf sorcerer. Why High Elf? Why not? Play the race you find the most interesting. Some will be slightly better as a stamina damage dealer though, and I'll put that up on the screen. But regardless of their relative performance, if you don't find a character interesting, you won't keep playing. So if you pick a race just because you think it's cool, I'm totally in favor of that. The food I'm using here is lava foot soup and salt rice, and that's my usual pick because I typically want the most stamina and stamina recovery that I can get. If I'm short a little on health, I'll usually cover that with armor glyphs. The Thief is my choice of Mundus Stone, and that gives me extra critical chance. I have all 64 attribute points in stamina, and for any new people, if you're playing a damage dealer, it's all stamina or magicka, depending on the build. I have 18,000 points of health, and if I was playing this on my live account, I'd put health glyphs on my armor to raise that. Make sure you put those on the big pieces, and that's either the head, chest, or legs. I have 30,000 points of stamina, and that's plenty. That's backed up by almost 2,000 points of stamina recovery, and that's high for a DPS, but this build is greedy. It eats that stamina up. 5,600 points of weapon damage and 56% crit standing still. Those aren't too bad. Since this is an Oaken Soul build, Major Brutality and Major Savagery are already added in, but crit is still going to go higher in a fight. Much higher actually, and I'll talk about that in the gear section. Penetration is super low here, but that's going to go higher in a fight as well. And this is one of the few builds I've done where I don't include a source of major breach. But the nice thing about that is the moment I group up and a tank provides it, that's going to increase my damage greatly. Resistances are pretty good, and that's from the Oaken Soul Ring. Crit resistance is lousy, but this is a PvE build and monsters don't crit. You can only get critically hit by other players in PvP. Okay, let's look at my skills bar. So where is this Federo anyway?
He has this little place in Cedrith Mora. If he's there, we can shake him down for information, then get lost before the Reformers' mercenaries show up.
Cedrith Mora, Telvanni stronghold. I don't blame you for wanting company. With that tail, you might as well have a target on your back. Other than the fact that this build uses only one bar, this is very much a classic Stamsorc build, and it incorporates the skills you would expect. First is Critical Surge, which is a powerful healing skill that restores my health as I do damage. I'll cast this right before I enter combat and refresh it once every 30 seconds. This is a flex slot, and you can really slot any heal here that you prefer. In the fight right after this section, I'm going to slot Blood Craze from the dual-wield skill line. That helps me eke out a little more damage while giving me more than enough healing for the fight. Next, I'll use Deadly Cloak from the dual-wield skill line, and this is a powerful skill that does great damage to enemies around me while reducing my damage that I take from ground-based AoEs. If you're doing a dual-wield build, don't leave that skill out unless you have a darn good reason. Next, I'll cast Hurricane, which is a signature Stamsorc skill. This does ever-increasing damage to targets around me and is a skill that you want to let run its full duration because it does the most damage at the end. There's a small downside here in that it does make your character harder to see, but remember that your character is always in the same place on your screen. So even if your character does seemingly get lost in the pyrotechnics sometimes, you know where you are. Next, I use my new scribe skill, Magic Knife, which is a custom version of Traveling Knife. Because I've selected the magic damage script, the skill consumes magicka. That lets me take pressure off my stamina resource, and without doing it this way, the build wouldn't work. Other than damage on par with a spammable attack, Magic Knife activates the dual-wield passive Ruffian. If you watched a couple of my previous videos, you may already know that this allows me to get that 15% damage bonus to dual-wield attacks for 6 seconds. Normally, Ruffian only works on low health targets. Being able to get this bonus all the time is the secret sauce that makes this build recipe work. Now that I have the Ruffian passive active, I'm going to use my spammable attack, Rapid Strikes. I'll use this dual-wield skill 5 times, then cast Magic Knife again. Again, I use Rapid Strikes 5 times, then I cast Magic Knife a final time. I'll cast Rapid Strikes 4 more times, then it's just rinse and repeat until whatever I'm fighting is dead. Now, I didn't mention it, but I'm using a light attack before each skill. That makes this build a little more difficult to use than Oaken Soul builds that use a lightning staff. And I'll be the first to admit that my own light attack weaving can be pretty bad sometimes. But think of that light attack damage as bonus damage. The more light attacks you get to register, the higher the bonus you get. It's not mandatory that you have great light attack weaving to use this build. Last on my bar is the Sorcerer's Ultimate Charged Atronach. I had been running the Greater Storm Atro, but I had to admit on this build that the Charged Atro seemed to do slightly more damage. And with the Charged Atro's area damage, it seems like the obvious choice. If you have the Greater Storm Atro, I wouldn't use gold to respec just to change this one skill because they're extremely close in single target damage. But if you need to respec other skills as well, go ahead and change to the Charged Atro. Alright, that's it for skills. Let's see them in action. I'm sure I can round up one of the usual knuckleheads. So the build did 40,000 points of damage per second, and you can see that almost half of that came from Rapid Strikes. Of course, anything that I'm spamming that much is going to do a large portion of the damage. The question is, how is that damage? And the answer is good, because this is right there with the 1-bar lightning staff builds I've given you. If I parse this on the Iron Atro, I would expect this to do somewhere between 70 and 80,000, depending on how good my light attack weaving was. In any case, this is enough damage to do any dungeon you want, including veteran DLC dungeons. And you don't have to carry that lightning staff around. This is going to be harder to play though, because this is melee. You'll have to watch your footwork and not stand in stupid. Alright, let's have a look at the gear. Hey, as long as we're talking, I've been meaning to ask, what do you always give me a hard time about my gear?
Look, if I see an enchantment on your weapon or armor run low, I'm going to call it out. I'd want someone to do the same if it were me.
No, don't. Just stop. I'll worry about my gear, you worry about yours. If you don't stop, I'll get you back, and you know I will. So I did something while I was making this video that I don't normally do. I changed gear sets. I changed not once, but twice. Here's the short version. Stamina recovery isn't as high as what I showed you on the character sheet. It's going to be a couple 100 points less. But that's okay, because I didn't need as much as I initially thought I did. Other stats are going to be close to the same. So what sets did I end up with? Well, the fight you just saw was with Order's Wrath and Deadly Strike, and I was prepared to finish off with those as the final sets. You've seen me use both of those plenty of times, and if you have those sets or can easily get them, run them. But I kept having this nagging thought that I was forgetting a set that would work well here. Finally, I had to resort to scrolling through a list that had every set in the game. Of course, what I was looking for had to be under S near the end, and that set is the Sword Dancer 5-piece set. Here's the result of a fight with Nomeg Rhine. That's Nomeg Hyrule's equally lazy brother. Sword Dancer outperformed Order's Wrath with ease, and that's going to be what I go with here in the gear section. In part, that's because I always wanted to do a setup with Sword Dancer, but it never worked out. On this build, where 4 out of 5 skills on my bar are dual-wield skills, Sword Dancer works like a charm. But if you don't run out and farm this from the Blessed Crucible dungeon, I don't blame you. That's an easy dungeon, but the Sword Dancer set has extremely limited usefulness. Anyway, I have 2 Sword Dancer daggers. The main hand is Nirnhoned with a fire enchant, and the offhand is charged with a poison enchant. I'm wearing a light slime cross shoulder for extra crit, and that's my only light piece. Everything else is medium. My other 5-piece set is still Deadly Strike. I definitely wouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater here. Deadly Strike is a keeper. On any build where the spammable attack is channeled, this set is going to be extremely hard to beat. This set gives a big damage increase to rapid strikes and my damage over time skills. Get it from Cyrodiil or get it from guild traders. I can promise you there will never come a time when you regret picking up the Deadly Strike set. The final piece of the gear puzzle, and the most important piece, is the Oaken Soul Ring. While I'm not using any heavy attacks here, there are so many other things that get buffed by this ring that it's a must-have for this 1-bar build. You'll have to level the Antiquities skill line to get this item, but as far as Antiquities go, this one is easy to get. Jewelry traits are bloodthirsty, and I have weapon damage glyphs on those pieces. Enchants on my body pieces are stamina. Okay, let's look at champion points. The blue champion slottables are Fighting Finesse, Deadly Aim, Thaumaturge, and Wrathful Strikes. The red champion point slottables are Celerity, Bloody Renewal, Rejuvenation, and Boundless Vitality. If you're worried about going to see Federo, don't be. I've got your back.
Some part of me wonders if I'd be better off not knowing the answers, but I guess we'll have to see.
Well guys, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, help me out by hitting the like button, and if you want to see more content like this, please subscribe to the channel. I'm going to skip the fashion show today. Sharp doesn't seem to like that stuff very much. And anyway, he's just wearing the duds he came in. My character is wearing the Drowned Mariner motif, and you guys can look that stuff up if you're interested. There's a fight at the end here, which is a spoiler for one of the new group dungeons coming with Gold Road. If you don't want to see that ahead of time, then go ahead and cut the video off here. Again, thanks for watching. Have a great day and enjoy your adventures in Tamriel. You better check your gear. It looks like it got stomped on, with you in it. Too soon? Sorry. Let's go see Federo.